My name is Andy French, and I am a real estate inspector. I already knew Terry. Before I bought my first deal with him, I had inspected probably, I don't know, let's say 100, maybe 200 apartment investments for his clients. And I just knew who I wanted to use when I got started investing in apartments myself. Well, it's not any particular word or phrase, it's just his whole attitude about the process of investing in apartments. You know, it's pretty much a difficult process for most people to understand, and Terry's grasp of it and his ability to communicate with his clients impressed me, and I wanted that for myself and my wife. Terry had little books for different neighborhoods with 15 or 20 properties that are on the market, and he had another 30 or so properties that weren't on the market with their rent rates. So he was able to compare, you know, neighborhood by neighborhood, what the interest rates were. So he was able to compare neighborhood by neighborhood what the rental rates were in those markets, and you could tell if you had an upside with the property you were looking at or not. So it was relatively easy to pick out the properties that were likely to have rent raises in them. Terry is a patient negotiator. He had, on my deals, we had a fairly aggressive seller, and when the seller was playing out those games, he was patient and advised me not to be too concerned about it. When the seller made a lot of his unilateral changes, we simply sat down and looked at where we're at. On the sell side, we took an aggressive approach, and once again, it took a little bit of patience, but we both felt the market was ready for the prices we had, and he was right. Perhaps not any specific thing Terry said, but pretty much the whole idea of how he coached me and how he helped me anticipate how things were going to go. It was that awareness of the process and awareness of where things are going to be down the road that were very good. Terry understands the process of where things are going, and he also is pretty good at understanding me, and when I'm operating with him as an investor, he understands what I am needing to know, and once in a while he'll steer me back to the center if I'm getting too involved in the minutia, and that is my habit. So basically it's a process thing for him, yet he's not just totally transaction driven. Well, right now all of my apartment investments have been sold, and I've moved my portfolio into commercial property out of state, and those are going well mostly. Some of them doing very well, and some of them are being fed by the ones that are doing well. Had I stayed in apartments here, probably would have done a little bit better, especially with this recovery in the market that's happened in the last 4 or 5 years. Terry and I discussed whether that was a really good thing to do or not. However, with the cap rates that we were able to win in Texas and Oklahoma, we felt like it was the right thing to do. And I guess for us, the story is still yet to be written, yet to be finished. So had we stayed in apartments here in San Diego, the current market probably would be easier on us than the slightly depressed markets we chose out of state. The best part was the results. We had fantastic results. Our property went about 250% up. The best part, honestly, was the payoff. We did our first apartment investment with Terry, appreciated 250% during our holding period. And so I wouldn't call it a Grand Slam home run, I'd call it a walk-off Grand Slam home run. We did very, very well. The patience was part of the process, but I think our timing was just perfect when we sold. In Terry's team, I am the inspector. So from that standpoint, I understand that he's been very aggressive about picking a good inspector. I know a large number of the other team members, the pest control guy, the property management people. He's got a cadre of lenders that are perfectly willing to listen to his pitch for the apartment and for the investor. And Terry's always been aware of that team concept and what is necessary in order to be able to reproduce the results, both for the investor and for him and for the team members. So he's a great team captain in that standpoint. A lot of my learning curve was about myself, about how much I was willing to work at it and how effective I would be at communicating with my tenants and the vendors. And some of the things went well and some didn't. Terry was in the background to help me on that, but still it was my responsibility to go out there and change tenants, putting the best tenant I could find in place. Terry was really good help in keeping me abreast of the market rents during that process. And when I made rent increases, the market accepted them readily. Let's say 9.5. I don't think there's anything such thing as a 10, but Terry did what he said he would do. My results were phenomenal. I've done some other deals with Terry as an investor in a group partnership, and those did excellent. So, my results, the bottom line, the money results, I mean, there's nothing to argue with. I think Terry's primary value to me while we were selling was picking the sales price. I thought we were a little too high initially, then I thought we weren't high enough. And we pretty much stuck to that same price and we got it. So knowing the market, knowing what the market would give us was something that I didn't have, and Terry did, and he turned out to be right. I have heard Terry talk about investments with probably several hundred of his clients over the years. I don't know exactly how many deals, let's say at least 100. And he consistently understands that you can't rip off the other side and basically thrive. And at the same time, he goes after what's fair on his side of the deal. He's got good ethics as far as telling the other side things that need to be said, and a good judgment about those things that don't need to be said. He's consistently trying to understand the entire deal from the perspective of the home inspector, and it's amazing the amount he does know and the understanding that he brings to his clients in the transaction. I first met Terry Moore in 1998. I had inspected a triplex he had listed over on Georgia Street. Yeah, it was old and beat up, and I said so, and I got this phone call from him. I expected him to be beating me up, saying, no, this thing's perfect. But he didn't. He said, I don't understand about that foundation bracing with the wood framing. Could you tell me what you wanted to say? I thought, all right. So I checked out the realtor who I was representing, her client. He said, no, this guy's, he's good. He's not as rough and tough as the typical apartment broker. Who went to that time I was just doing single families, and the apartment brokers were sort of being known as somebody that ran roughshod over everybody. So I introduced myself to him later. He wasn't really interested in picking up another home inspector. Took him a while to warm up to the idea, and when I told him my prices, he was absolutely amazed. He says, everybody I know, that's the highest price I ever heard on a home for an apartment inspection. So we talked about pricing a little bit, and he helped me actually set a price that the market would accept. And I still follow that pricing method today. So in many ways, he helped me get my apartment inspection business started. Terry's a little different. He shows up at all the inspections. Not everybody does that. A lot of people, when they do show up, they're out, in the car on the phone, setting up their next appointment. But Terry goes on the roofs. He goes up my ladder and walks on the roofs. I think there might be 3 or 4 deals where he didn't do that. But I only have a couple other realtors that do that at all, and they don't do it every time. So I'm very impressed about that. Terry wants to know about the details. He doesn't really want to know the chemical composition of the roofing, but he wants to know if the trees, the leaves that are deteriorating on the roof are affecting the roof. And he understands those sorts of things. He has a little different background. He ran a hardware store in his past, and so he understands a lot of these things, the difference between a nut and a bolt. And so that makes it easier for me to communicate with him and his clients. Often his clients wind up wanting more detail than a lot of my investors. I think that's because Terry has coached them that they need to have those details to be successful. And he likes my style of talking to the clients and helping them understand what it is, good or bad, helping them understand what it is. Terry doesn't ask me to sell the property for him. A lot of my realtors will say, "Oh, don't hit that too hard. All those buildings up there have cracked foundations. Don't overemphasize that." Terry wants to say, "Is this worse than the normal ones in this area?" So he wants to get rankings in. He's looking for information that his clients will need, and I often think he's also thinking about the sale at the back end of this, and that's the whole game. It's not just an acquisition; it's also getting rid of it. So I think for me, Terry is what all the apartment brokers ought to try to be. It's not going to happen, but he certainly understands, communicates, cares, and looks out for the client's interest, sometimes years in advance of that need.